Joining us now, Corey Lewandowski. Corey, the engineer of the big Trump primary nomination victory from New Hampshire. Corey, also the author of 2 best-selling books along with Dave Bossie, Let Trump Be Trump and Trump's Enemies. And now, Corey has a new podcast. Yes, I know you love podcasts, right? Yeah, I know you love them. Podcasts are not easy to do. I don't have enough time to do one, but I'm living my podcast vicariously through Corey and Dave Bossie. Guess what it's called? Deep in the Swamp. That's because they're deep in the swamp. The Corey Lewandowski, Dave Bossie podcast comes out every Wednesday. It's called Deep in the Swamp, and you can find it. Just go to roughrider.media, not .com, roughrider.media. It's also on Apple, iTunes, and all that. Just look for Deep in the Swamp and the Corey Dave podcast, which just came out, their first issue, just out. And he's joining us now. Corey Lewandowski, great to have you, sir.
John, I'm back in the swamp, so it's a snowy swamp today, but I'm back.
I know. I stayed in Southeast Virginia to stay out of it. I know you texted me yesterday and you said, are you in our swamp studio? Well, I'm like, no, I'm staying in Southeast Virginia where we have no snow. Corey, I want to start with a somber note. Our good friend Bruce Benton had a stroke on Friday. One of your and I best friends. He's been there for us with the Trump campaign in New Hampshire for a long time. He's also a dear friend of ours. He's in ICU, I believe. Just give a quick update on him, Corey.
Yeah, it's terrible. Bruce is a young guy. He's only in his early 50s. He had a stroke late last week. They've had him in a medically induced coma. He's at Portsmouth Regional Hospital where he was helicoptered up there. And I went to visit with him over the weekend, and really right now they're hoping that the swelling in his brain goes down. He's got a great family, and our thoughts and prayers are with him and his entire family right now.
If everybody out there can say a prayer for Bruce Benton, our friend in New Hampshire, great guy. He's been there with the Trump campaign with Corey from the very beginning. He did a lot of work for us during the campaign in New Hampshire, and just an all-around great guy, and also ran the Negron for Congress campaign. So it's just a sad situation, especially a man of that age, to be in that sort of shape. So keep him in your prayers. Corey, your new podcast, Deep in the Swamp, what inspired this?
John, it's an opportunity to go out and tell the real story, what's really going on, because you and I have seen it too often. We've seen the fake news stories. We've seen the fake news on the legacy media outlets. And so Dave Bossie and I decided that it was important for us, particularly leading into the re-election campaign, to have a forum to go out and tell people exactly what's going on from deep in the swamp. And we call it Deep in the Swamp because we're going to tell you what's really going on in Washington. And, a lot of people say, well, you're a swamp creature, number one. I live in New Hampshire. But number two, Dave and I both have access to people absolutely, know what's going on in Washington. We talk to these people every day. We're at the White House on a regular basis. And we want our listeners to hear what's really taking place, to bypass the fake news and to get the truth. And that's what this is really all about.
Well, listen, I heard the first one. I was there when you did the first one. I thought the content was outstanding. And now it's going to be every Wednesday? A new one comes up?
Every Wednesday. And, John, look, it's a work in progress. You've been doing this. You're a pro. You've been on the radio for 8 years. Our first podcast just went up. I hope, in 8 years from now, if I'm lucky enough to still be involved somehow, that I'm as good as you are. But we're going to have a lot of special guests. Look, I think we're going to have some governors on, some former governors, some members of the cabinet, some previous members of the cabinet. I have the privilege, as you know, of working with the Vice President's Political Action Committee, so I'd like to get him on. And maybe if it all works out well, maybe we'll have even have the privilege of getting the boss on, the President of the United States, and let him go directly to the American people. But it's just so important. When I pick up the newspapers or I hear the stories on the TV, I know what the truth is because I've lived it. And the latest ridiculousness that the FBI potentially opened up an investigation into the president after the firing of Jim Comey is so salacious, so outrageous that I think our podcast on this Wednesday is going to be about that. And the guys like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Andy McCabe and all the things that are in our Trump Enemies book, we're going to spend some time talking about it this week.
Corey, it's really unbelievable, the story that broke Friday by the New York Times. I was really flabbergasted by it. I never thought I'd see the Times, as bad as it is, as fake I mean, it is fake news, basically. Even their former editor, Abramson, said that in her book, Merchants of Truth. She said headlines are opinion. They're done to get clicks, clickbait. That she said news analysis masquerades as its opinion, masquerading as news. So, she already debunked her own company saying it was fake news. But the story on Friday was unbelievable. I mean, I had to read that 2 times because the first time I said to myself, okay, there's something here I had to miss. So I went back, read the thing again, line by line. It's like there was absolutely no evidence. There was no even indication of any evidence. It's just basically a bunch of overzealous FBI federal agents that hate Trump that basically concocted this in order to find a way to hurt him based on nothing. I mean, it's not like they had evidence or anything. It's just like, okay, he fired Comey, therefore he's an agent of a foreign country. I mean, what an absurd thing to write in the New York Times. I would have thought I would find that in The Onion.
Well, yeah, but John, where was the Attorney General when all this was happening? Right? The FBI says they're going to open an investigation. Where's the Attorney General? He's lost in space.
Well, when I was at the press briefing at the White House a week ago Monday, the president really blasted Jeff Sessions, and that was an on-the-record meeting with his top surrogates, Corey and the Nation, and he really skewered Jeff Sessions. He said he was the worst hire he had ever made in his life. He skewered him and said that anytime something tough came up that he just hid in his office and he couldn't wait to get rid of him. So I don't know where the Attorney General was in all of this. But, the other thing that we have never, that has never come out is why the FISA thing was allowed to go through. How come that has not been released, Corey? I mean, why has the president just released that phony FISA application for all the world to see? Why has he held back on that?
He needs to do this. Look, John, it's not just the FISA application, the renewals that were signed by Rod Rosenstein. It's the 302s, which are the FBI notes, which were by Bruce Orr, the number 4 person at the Justice Department, whose wife Nellie Orr was paid for and working for Fusion GPS, the creator of the false dossier. Mm-hmm. When is this information going to become public? Because what they're afraid of, what those members of the Justice Department are afraid of, is that they know that they were lying when that FISA application was filled out, which, by the way, is a crime. They know that they did this to go after someone based on their politics. And now this story that they went after Donald Trump, that they potentially open an investigation because of his potential support of Russia, which we know is not true. If that's the criteria, are we going after Hillary Clinton for Uranium One? Are we going after Barack Obama for the reset? This is partisan politics at its worst. We will look back on this episode at the FBI, and it will hurt their reputation for the next 50 years. 12 senior members of the FBI, from the director to the general counsel to the deputy director to the person in charge of counterintelligence, have all either been fired or have left for other reasons, and there is more coming. And I said it last night on Lou Dobbs, and I'll say it again. These people should have been taken out in handcuffs. Mm-hmm. They should have been perp walked, and these people need to be accountable because Andy McCabe, who was the acting director who opened this investigation, on the day he became the acting director, lied to his own FBI under oath on 3 separate occasions, and there was nothing that's been done about it.
Well, because they're Democrats. I mean, if there's no other answer for this, because we have 2 sets of justice, one for Republicans and Trump, and the other for anybody else who's opposed to him, and they don't meet in the middle. It's like when you read this New York Times piece alleging that they thought that President Trump could have been an agent. I mean, get this, an agent of the Russian government because of his foreign policy, which, by the way, has been very anti-Russia, especially as it relates to energy, Syria, and everything else. But you look at Obama, that's like saying, okay, Obama gave $2.2 billion cash on pallets, flew it in cargo planes to Iran, and signed a horrific deal. Does that make Obama an agent of the Iranian government? Just his foreign policy view. This thing is absurd beyond belief. And the fact is, every single legacy media has picked it up as if it's a real story. That's what's even more disturbing. You would have thought that some of the legacy media would have at least had the courage to say, really, this is kind of a ridiculous expose, and the Times should be ashamed of themselves. No, Every one of the legacy liberal left-wing anti-Trump media picked it up as if it was a serious expose.
But ask yourself why, John. Why did they pick it up Friday? Because the real story, which they didn't want to report on, was dozens of members of Congress, hundreds of staffers down on the boondoggle in Puerto Rico, right, with Bob Menendez with his shirt off talking to the girl behind the umbrella in the bikini. That's what the real story is during a government shutdown. Because let me tell you, John, if that were the Republicans, it would be the only news story. Mm-hmm. So instead, they come up with this false narrative, and I watched all the clips on it. A bombshell report has now hit. Breaking news. We must tell you. Whatever legacy channel you turned into, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, it was the only story. There was not a mention, hardly, of the Democrats down in Puerto Rico on a boondoggle, on a chartered private 737, so they could be on vacation while the government is closed and have the ability to bypass TSA because they had a special chartered plane. That's what the real story is, and nobody wants to admit it. And if you know the facts, Nancy Pelosi was supposed to be on that trip, but I think she was sunburned from her trip to Hawaii, so she took a pass on the Puerto Rico trip.
30 of them went out. The 109 lobbyists flew on a charter jet right in the middle of government shutdown while they're all whining and squealing about government employees not getting paid. They can't put food on the table. They can't pay rent. They can't buy medicine, and they're frolicking in Puerto Rico with 109 lobbyists, which was basically 3.3 lobbyists for every congressman there, coupled with the fact they brought their families, their staff. The whole thing is gross, but you're right, gets knocked off the front pages. We're with Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossie, the author of two best-selling New York Times books, Let Trump Be Trump. That's about the campaign, Trump's enemies, about his administration. Buy them both. You can get those on our website. Just go to johnfredericks.com. Click the link on the ad there for their books. It's right there. Plus, he's now the author of a weekly Wednesday podcast, Deep in the Swamp, which you can get by going to their website, roughrider.media. How easy is that? roughrider.media. Corey, let's get to the shutdown. Everybody told me 2 weeks ago the president was going to cave and that they'd find some way out. I don't think that's going to happen, Corey, not based on what I've seen.
Well, John, I just came through the airport. I had to fly out of Boston this morning. I landed down at Reagan National. And I got off the airplane, and a guy stopped me, and he said, "Hey, you Corey Lewandowski?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Hey, do me a favor." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Tell the president to keep fighting. We voted for him to fight for us, and we can tough this one out." And I'll tell you what, I believe that. And look, Jennifer Jacobs, the Bloomberg reporter, had a tweet out today that said she was down in maybe Charleston or Charlotte, and she ran into a CBP official as she was coming through airport security. And he asked her, he said, "Oh, you're from Washington, D.C. What do you do?" And she said, "I'm a reporter." And he said, "We're with the president. We're here. We're not getting paid. We have our savings, but we'll never get our lives back, basically. So make sure the president keeps fighting for us." And, John, I know it's tough. Believe me, I grew up poor. I know what it's like to not have any money, and I feel for the families who aren't getting their paychecks. But if we don't fight this fight right now, today, our children and our grandchildren will pay the price for it in perpetuity, because it will take one illegal immigrant coming across a border that we don't have protected and kill one of our children that we will be here saying, why didn't we do everything we could? And God forbid it ever happens, but unfortunately, we know it happens all too often. And we have to stand firm with the president to get the wall or the barrier or the partition or whatever it is you want to call it built so that we can have a safe and secure country, just like every other country on the planet that did it. Look, I just saw last week another country just finished a 714-kilometer long wall on the border of Syria to keep Syria out of their country.
Turkey.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, look, if it works over there, why doesn't it work here? Of course it does. And that's what our podcast, Deep in the Swamp, is about. I think this week it's about the wall. It's about making sure we're protecting Americans because, John, like you, I have met so many angel mothers that I've traveled around the country and angel fathers and people who've lost their loved ones because of illegal immigrants. And I don't understand how we even allow this, how this conversation can even be going on anymore. We have to do everything. And the only solution that I see is building that barrier on the southern border, and we have to make sure the president holds firm. And if he doesn't get the money, and he has done everything he can, then I will go on and encourage the president once again to declare a national emergency, because we are at an emergency in our country, and we have to do everything we can to stop it.
I think he's got to do it. And look, the president has said he'd rather find a legislative solution, and I think he's trying to do that. And by the way, he's not going to Mar-a-Lago, and he's not going to Puerto Rico. He and his staff and the vice president's team, they're staying in the White House. They're willing to negotiate. The Democrats are not going to do that. There's no end in sight. But I agree with you, Corey. The president, this is just one of the things he cannot cave on. This is what he promised, and this is what he has to do. But if they can't resolve it legislatively, I agree with you 110%. He has to declare a national emergency, get the military down there, break ground, get it stopped. Some judge in San Francisco will stop it, and then it'll go all the way up to the top, and we'll see what plays out. I don't think he's got any other choice, and I think if it gets up there, he's going to get the authority, because you can't tell the executive branch what moves they can make in a national emergency. Otherwise, you'll have the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco running our military, right? I mean, it's crazy.
John, 52 times since 1974, presidents have declared national emergencies. Bill Clinton declared 17 of them in 8 years, of which 6 of them are still in effect today. So this is not something new. This started with Jimmy Carter following the Iran hostage crisis, or right around that time. And look, it is something that should be used very rarely. But what this president has attempted to do is he is now attempting for the 4th week to negotiate with the Democrats. And what they've said is, hey, you open the government for 30 days and we'll negotiate again on day 29. That's not how it works. We need a solution. We need an equitable solution. And if they're not willing to come to the table, then this president has the legal authority to declare that emergency, and the American people will stand with him.
I think that is exactly what he has to do. The people will stand with him. He's got to do the right thing, and he's got to get this done. And you look at the border crisis and the number of migrants coming in. Look, you said the other day, Corey, there's another, 15,000 strong caravan developing in Honduras, basically after Congress appropriated $10 billion for them, right, on paper. They got another caravan coming. I mean, there's no end in sight of these. And as I said over and over, this is the unholy alliance that feign border security. They want open borders. They want cheap votes. And your Wall Street Republican friends at Goldman Sachs, like Gary Cohn, that want cheap labor. That's why you get the basic open border situation that we've had. Corey Lewandowski's podcast coming out again Wednesday.
John,
Corey,
one last idea,
Go ahead.
And it may be a crazy one. Look, if we can't get this wall built on our side, let's give the money in foreign aid to Mexico and make them build on their side. I'm sure the Democrats would be in favor of that.
Hey, that's a great idea. We already gave them $10 billion. Why not give them $15 billion and say, hey, here's $5 billion. Get Mexican jobs. In fact, you can hire the migrants that have come up. You've already offered them 1-year work visas, and they can build the wall. Perfect.
That's exactly right. Hey, John, we have to think outside the box, so to speak. So if we got to give them $15 billion, we've already given them 10. They'll build the wall on their side. They'll keep them in. We'll keep them out. Same thing for us.
I love the idea. Corey Lewandowski podcast coming up Wednesday. Check it out. Deep in the Swamp, roughrider.media.